everywhere else in the world. I'm looking at the Japanese Zaibatsus or other such things, or do you think we have it all and we don't necessarily need to go?
It's a good question, and you always want to answer yes, and you always want to answer no. You know, there's things different about our culture, but then again, there's things that we can learn. All around the world, I get asked the question more than anything, how do we start our own Silicon Valley here? They look to the phenomena that has happened in Silicon Valley, all the startups, the availability of resources and money, and a lot of angels that believe in that kind of a market, and it's really tough to start it up everywhere in the world. The easiest way is to have a successful idea and an app for a mobile phone, and then you could have a huge hit in Australia and a lot of other places that I go to, Singapore. So I can't give you a real direct answer. Yeah, if you're in charge, if you're doing a startup, you should study a lot of models, but you know what? You just use common sense. You've gotten through life. You have certain needs to start your company. Go out and talk to people and explain what the needs are. If they have those resources available, try to get them. But you know what? No problem at all in writing the book yourself. If, for example, almost everything I did in my life that was huge engineering successes, I never once was taught how to do them. Never took courses in them, even writing a basic language. I just sat down and worked out principles and then started writing the code because I had personal reasons wanted to do it so fast. I didn't tell the story about the floppy disk, but you know, when you have personal reasons, you find the ways to do it without knowing how to do it and write the book yourself. And that could be even for startups. The world changes, and a technique that works one year might not work the next year or decade or whatever. Yeah.
What's your favorite way of accessing the news these days?
Yes, for quite a while I was using Google Reader to access the news, and it's on. I was so disappointed when it went away. So I use a website called Feedly because it still has a lot of nice little concise headlines, and then you can see a little more of the data, or you can go to the full article very quickly. And that's how I work my way through a lot of news, deciding, because I see a lot, about 10 times as many headlines as I'm interested in, to choose which ones. And that's really where I get my knowledge base of the world. And I follow a lot of technology sites, and I also follow some regular news sites and some local sites to where I live. That's how I do it, yeah.
You seem like a poster child for the modern maker hacker movement. Do you have a particular education bent toward that community or any support?
I don't necessarily have advice because I think back to when I was in that doer maker category, and yeah, you know, I actually did listen to what other people said, but kind of in a remote sense, not like they were talking to me like a parent. I don't have that kind of advice. Here is how you do something. You know, when you're creative, the last thing you want is for somebody to be able to tell what you're going to do next, or to tell you, here's some rules you follow. The intuition is very important in people who are really creative. As far as makers go, they are developing the talents that are so important that, you know, you actually build something and it functions, it does something. You build another thing. Every time you build something, you're a little better at building the next one up. And I went on that path. I am very close to all sorts of maker movements. The Homebrew Computer Club was named Homebrew. You build it, you make it yourself. And that's where Apple came from. So I'm extremely loyal to that group and that kind of person. I'm also very loyal to hackers, trying to explore a system like I did with blue boxes, find weaknesses and holes and exploit them just to show off and tell other people, you know, and you know, not to be a real bad guy and steal somebody's money or something like that. I believe that you develop much deeper creative thinking about ways things might be that aren't obvious, that aren't in any book. You really learn to think outside the book, and that most of the creative people that are known for heading the greatest computer achievements in the companies will go back and talk about their little kind of minor hacking experiences and how fun they had tricking a few friends in college maybe, or things like that. They almost all have this slight misbehavior. It doesn't have to be technical. A slight misbehavior in the background kind of leads to, you know, enjoying of life. Like, I don't want to be around every CEO in the world doing important things. I'd rather be around the interesting people that I like hearing their stories, and you know, you'd make movies out of those things. Yeah.
If you were really happy to keep the iPad and Mac separate as they are now, or would you lend them like the Surface, the create like an actually good Surface?
Yeah, would I keep the iPad and the Macintosh separate and different as they are now? The Macintosh being more of a real computer from the old days. Anyone can write software for it. Anyone can sell software for it. Not much of it's happening anymore. You can run multiple programs on the screen at the same time. There are a lot of things I like about it that I would like in the iPad. But number one is to keep that technical side of things. Things like files have been kept totally out of the iPad. You never see a file. Yeah, it's hard to give a file to somebody on a flash key like we do with computers. You know, there's limitations, but it's probably better for the masses, and I would keep the two products separate and distinct as Apple does. I think it's a good decision to limit the product, limit its abilities is a huge benefit to the majority of people, and those who want more still can find computers. And thank heavens for the MacBook Pro. Yeah. On the Newton, did they have a lot of lessons to do the iPad and the iPhone? The Newton was very, very early, and I can't remember it perfectly. I've got two in a box in my garage, but it has, I think it had some self-tutorial, a little bit of tutorial, but it was designed by those people that thought so clearly about making things intuitive. That was a word we used a lot in those days, that you didn't need to know very much to just tap around and to be able to use your own handwriting, not having to go into a keyboard. To this day, every time I grab a smartphone, if I can speak what I want done, or if I can speak a command, or if I can ask a question with my voice, I prefer doing that to following procedures of knowing to click here, you click there, you tap in that field, you type this. I don't want to follow procedures anymore. I want the world simple, and the Newton was a huge advance. The world didn't see it. We had predicted a huge market for these PDA-type devices, and that was the device, and it didn't really sell too well. It barely became profitable by the time we discontinued the Newton. But if you look at it, that whole idea was correct. The market for devices that are basically iPhones, smartphones, and iPads, very simple, intuitive devices, was that huge. It's just that the Newton was too early again, another one of a lot of failures Apple had, of being too early to make it in the right shape, features with the multi-touch screen where you use your own fingers. A lot of those things didn't exist yet. It was too expensive to build the right machine back then. Yes?
You mentioned your early work with Atari and the Pong game. Kind of looking back to the late 70s and early 80s, how dominant they were in the home video game industry. It seems there's a lot of parallels with how dominant Apple is today in certain consumer devices. Yet, as you see with Atari, they're not here anymore, and someone else is kind of leading that space. How do companies that rise up and get that kind of aura with consumers sustain?
Yeah, Apple's one of those rare exceptions to still be here as the company we started, whereas companies like Atari that really founded the whole industry of arcade games and was so big once, they kind of got bought out, and the people who bought it weren't the founders, and they didn't have that drive and vision and need to keep it beautiful and successful, and it kind of waned off in what it did. We offered the Apple II to Atari. Steve and I personally took it over to Al Alcorn's house and put it on his projector. They had their hands too full with another project that was going to make them a lot of money, and so they said no on that. Now, Apple's very fortunate, but we started with a product that was pretty unbelievable if you consider that it was all of our revenues for the first 10 years of Apple were due to this one product. It's nice to start with that kind of a luxury. It buys you a lot of time and it buys you a lot of success opportunities. So it's hard to compare them fairly. We didn't get consumed by another larger company that wanted to move into the business. We managed to stay our own company, and that was our goal from day one. We were very lucky to pull it off. We also wanted to remain private for a lot longer than we did, but sometimes there's a lot of different reasons why we kind of had to go for an IPO. Had to do with numbers of employees and amount of stock we'd given them and stuff like that. So Apple's one of those rare exceptions everybody looks up to. It's probably not the typical story for entrepreneurs to look for guides to follow. It was a very, more the unusual situation than the normal. And that's that. Yes?
Are we losing our edge in education? Because you mentioned that at heart you thought you'd be a teacher, and I'm looking at other places like South Korea, or maybe even Eastern Europe, and they still have their edge. And So it's a truth-based question. That's the number one part. Number two part, what can we do as parents to kind of stimulate that interest that you mentioned, that your father instilled in you in engineering? So I just.
Are we losing our edge in education? Well, the answer is yes and no. Yes, it's the phrase that I've heard my entire life from the day when I was in elementary school. People are always saying, oh, there's problems with education, doesn't have enough money. And that'll always be the case because family of 5 doesn't get 5 votes, and votes turn into money. The family with kids doesn't get votes. So education's that way, but it's pretty much deprived a little bit all over the world. There are cultures that emphasize it very, very strongly. In the United States, where more than half the people speak non-English at home. That's how many have come in, because the computer industry is what they are good at. You value what you are good at, math, science, that sort of thinking. They have an awful lot of people in those fields compared to us. However, we're known for starting a lot of industries, not just being a copier, not being able to make products, but being able to invent new things that didn't exist before. We got a huge reputation. And where does that come from? And I think it comes from a total culture, including, the fact that you're brought up believing that you can start things with your own ideas and anybody can make it starting out from zero. 2 kids with no money can, the American dream. That's what it's all about. So education in schools, academic education, is not the education that led to companies like Apple. Steve Jobs and I didn't have a degree when we started. Bill Gates and Paul Allen didn't have degrees, and there are a lot of other stories like that. The academic world is only one type of education: being on the streets, talking to friends, talking about ideas, reading magazines, reading news feeds, thinking about products you see, and getting inspired to another idea. Those are really the more important things. So I don't really downgrade the United States in that way, that we're uneducated. Maybe we have a larger group of people who are very illiterate than a lot of countries, a lot of societies in the world do. I mean, you can go to New Zealand and hardly find any kind of ghettos and poor people that don't have any education and can't speak as intelligently as you. So, that's just how it is. As far as, I don't know, what was the second part? Engineering? The passion for engineering in the kids. You know what? I go around and I tell the stories and I feel the passion I had, how great it was to build little devices and hook things together and be a builder and see the results of my work and think of my own ideas. And you know what? And maybe it'll inspire a few of them to think, wow, there's this little idea I have. I wonder if I could go and just start playing with it. Don't expect your first projects in your life to be real successful and make a lot of money or something. Just do it for fun for yourself to achieve a challenge, because your mind develops and you get smarter at doing it every single time. You have to build yourself into being ready for that home run, and it doesn't come from school. It doesn't come from academic subjects. They help. They're like tools, but you've really got to develop your own mind to be at the level you were. Like when I worked at Hewlett-Packard, if the PhDs in Hewlett-Packard lab had a problem, they wanted to reduce a circuit down from 59 transistors, they would send it over to our division and they'd give it to me. And then I would work on my little Apple I computer and run some simulations. Here, I got it in 11 transistors. But it was for wanting. Your wants in life are usually where you will go. What you want in a product is usually what the rest of the world will see. What Steve Jobs wanted in products is generally what Apple did. Have your own experience and trust yourself. It's like if you had a restaurant, you might not notice that some little change in the way the cooks were preparing a soup made it not taste that well to the users. You should have somebody who loves soup regularly testing, and really the owners of a company should really be testing their product all the time. A lot of tech companies make that an important thing, that you get used to the products you're building, so you'll at least have a better understanding of what's good about them and what's bad. Yeah.
Recently, Larry Ellison was worrying openly about the future of Apple without Steve Jobs, without that vision. What advice would you have for Apple for it not to avoid the trap that fell into Jobs' story? It just wasn't the same innovative company it was before Steve left the first company.
Well, Larry Ellison has a large ego and likes to speak very dramatically, like I'm in charge of the knowledge. And his statements were a little bit exaggerated about the future demise of Apple. Without Steve Jobs, Apple doesn't have a chance. He was expressing a concept that could be valid and they could believe in, but it was like, yeah, you can't take that for reality. Apple going out of business. Apple is such a huge company with so many platforms of revenue. It would get, even if it totally went into demise and had no great new products for a long time, it would get so many chances at restarts, reorganizations, new people, new hires. The company, Apple, is not going to go away. And not only that, as long as there's an earth, the early meaning of Apple, building good products that help people in their life, help them become masters, that stuff's not going to be forgotten. The commercials we've done, there's so many everywhere you go to research what Apple's about. It's a lot more than about what's going on in the company now. Larry Ellison's comments have some validity because it looks like, well, there's no new exciting product categories coming out of Apple like there had been, totally done a different way and better than anyone had done before, and that sort of stopped. But you know what? You go into plateaus of development. I noticed that among all the smartphones, there's an awful lot of them that are at that category I call good now and usable, but they kind of they have a little feature here that's good and a feature there that's bad, and they all are kind of leveled off. It's like we don't have some brand new introduction to the science of smartphones right now. So Apple's at sort of a level playing period. Now, Apple has one great thing. Its reputation has brought it a lot of love from users. They have not been let down and satisfied with their products. And when I see a gold iPhone 5 coming, if that's for real, I have to have it. I have to have it, And I know it's not going to change my phone life one bit. But that's one thing that the brand of Apple has really brought it. It's not a measure of cost for profit from features. It's largely a profit from trust in the brand. And that would be a sad thing if that went away. But, it's way too early, and it's way too dramatic a call. At first I just thought this is something you just ignore. It's Larry Ellison talking off the top, but once in a while somebody could be right too. Yeah. Okay, in the back.
So Steve, given the kind of stuff you're doing with Fusion IO and your sense of the future going to devices that are more vision and voice enabled, do you have a vision of where wearable technology fits into all of that?
Yes, I didn't talk about wearable technology because I was running out of time today. I would have loved to. I talk about products that where we go is largely what you want. And I have an iPod that I wear on all my plane flights with my music on it. And I also have a Martian smartwatch that connects with Bluetooth to my Apple phone, and I can just press a button on it and ask Siri any question and get Siri to do its stuff. But the iPod, I like scrolling on it. It's a pleasant feeling for this is how you can get around a watch without having to click buttons up and down menus. And I say, I wish I had the whole iPhone. My whole phone experience right here, but it's got to include speaking to it and asking questions with voice and dictating a short little text message to my wife. Got to have that. So I want it badly. So I'm very hopeful for wearable technology. I tried on Google Glass once. Wow, that was so cool to see Google Now. Information about your life today, knowing what plane flights you have, where you live, and what movies you might want to see, right up there in the display. Wow, and kind of not in the way of you seeing the world and dealing with people. That felt good too. So I'm really, I'm pretty sure wearable technology is going to appeal to other people like it does to me. That's one of the next big jumps. I think that is the next big block in computing after we're cloud. Yeah.
So Apple and Microsoft are such fierce competitors, and I grew up in the nascent computer industry. I'm just curious what your feelings are now at the turmoil at the CEO level at Microsoft.
I don't really have any strong feelings about Apple, Microsoft right now.
How about the past?
In the past, I felt that I was such a fan of the Macintosh and the ideas from Xerox PARC Center. I mean, I was as disappointed as anyone when the Macintosh failed. The world didn't buy a product just because it was the vision of the future. Clearly the vision of the future, it just wasn't time. Microsoft finally came into that market once it was affordable, just as affordable to build that machine as to build the old DOS machine where you had to memorize commands and type them. The single dimension machine with arrow keys instead of the two-dimension machine with the mouse. When Microsoft moved in there, I thought, oh my gosh, they're just copying Apple. It's like Apple had that way all to itself and business people. Every time you ran into a business person, they said, the Macintosh is a toy. It has pictures, but it can't do the real work of business. And 1, 2, 3 on a DOS computer is the only way to go. And those people had said, no, you don't need these little icons and windows and mouses. And all of a sudden, when the Microsoft ones converted that way, oh yeah, they were going to join us. So my saying is, every single computer in the world is now a Macintosh. So we won. And you can say the same thing about an iPhone.
We have time for 2 more questions. Scott, you have one.
2 more?
Do you have personal product ideas, and do you ever send these ideas to Apple?
I have a lot of personal product ideas. I used to send them when Steve Jobs was there, and in earlier days, and he'd usually get them fixed right away, anything I wanted. And one time I sent him one, and they fixed the problem I was complaining about, which had to do with dialing calls from a hotel where you have to dial 9 for an outside line and then 1 before the area code. It reversed the 1 and the 9. So he fixed that, but then he took out a feature that I use so heavily to phone into my own home and jump on my own home network. So I sort of said, well, there's a risk in getting things fixed and changed sometimes. No, I don't usually try to implore Apple. Sometimes I have little ideas about where they should be, and I talk about it in a lot of interviews with press, some of those ideas. I have some ideas that are technical. I have one, I'm going to even pop on my company, Fusion.io. Great idea I thought of just like in the old days, right back to when I first met them. Can you change the architecture in the NAND flash chip a little bit that would be advantageous to our industry? But I'm keeping that under wraps for now.
What advice could you give on business partnerships, making them work better?
What advice could I give on business partnerships to make them better? I am not a businessman, I'm a technologist. So my advice would be just an echo of everything you can read and hear real business experts, speaking of. Steve Jobs would certainly say, don't give away the ship, negotiate hard and tight, negotiate well, and don't be sloppy on that. And he was the world's greatest, negotiator in my mind, and salesman in that effect. Partnerships, if you're establishing a partnership that's very short term, maybe that's not the right way to go. The long-term partnerships that you'll still be in business together and working to help each other for a much longer time are the way to go. I'm a loyal person, like I was to Hewlett Packard. I got turned down by them 5 times for the personal computer, and had to go off and do it with Apple. But it's, when you have a relationship with somebody, I'm very loyal. Most businessmen would say the opposite. They would say, oh no, it's quarterly profit is much more important. My personal thoughts on the new Mac Pro. You mean, yes. When I see the actual size of it, I think, wow, it reminds me of the Cube a lot. I don't know the insides of it. As far as those kind of workstation machines are going into architects, they're going into movie creation, video editing. Apple had a big reputation for being #1 in movie editing and workstations with our Final Cut Pro. And we've dropped way down. And companies like Hewlett Packard have the most beautiful, highest power, Intel chips and better design for just modular piecing, putting together. So it's a market that we've sort of declined in. I love the product though because it speaks Apple throughout. It's just something beautiful that you love and adore. And if the capabilities, the features, the performance are good enough for your needs, I would choose that over any other workstation. Just beauty means a lot to me. I look at my Apple products and still there's none that's as beautiful quite as the iPhone. There are a lot of beautiful products out there, so I'm attracted to it. Thank you.